I don't want to do a quick review of last week. Get into this week. The scriptures tell us that given a choice, we will often choose to go our own way. And in most cases, we do go the wrong way. It is mankind's long and sordid history to do this. Adam and Eve followed Satan, believing that they were already wise enough to know all the correct choices before being tested in any profound way about all of the details of those choices. Give a baby a Ferrari and watch him smack it up. That's what's happened here. It's flashy. It's flashy, and it's pretty, and it's fast. And I'm fast as it is. Until it gets too fast for me. And even David knows what happens when the car goes too fast for the driver. It smacks up. It looks cool at first, but in mommy or daddy are driving it, it's something else altogether. And you treat it a little bit differently. It opened worlds of evil to them that they had never imagined. Had they only waited for this power and equality with Yahweh's mind and wisdom would have been theirs. To have, along with the ability to use it for the betterment of mankind, rather than their own selfish motivations for greed and power. But they could not now see the extreme possibility of evil as well as the wonder of Yahweh. But only from the outside they saw it, unable to access it from inside. Now they could, in any way that would help them reverse the events that this errant choice had led them to. Adam and Eve, in their choice to disobey Yahweh, brought sin historically into the world. There were consequences to what Adam and Eve did, as well as the creation as a whole. The natures of mankind and animals were both changed when sin came into the world. Man was allowed to eat flesh now of the animals Yahweh used to make their garments and clothing, not leaves. That was not enough to properly cover these things. Genesis, the 3rd chapter, the 21st verse. Yahweh fashioned garments from animal skins for Adam and his wife and clothed them properly. Sure, they knew that they were naked in their bodies, but they did not perceive that their nakedness was at all improper or any disadvantage to them. But now, with full awareness of this evil and good, they were sensitive to both where they could look upon it before and not blush or feel any sinful emotions in them. Now they could not behold it without some shame and without some finding of sexual desire arising in them, nearly uncontrolled. And it was now being the cool of the day, and their spirits also seized with fear of the divine displeasure. They might feel a shivering all over them, and not from the wind. Now they want to cover themselves up. But now, more especially, this may have respect to the nakedness of their thoughts, now fully bared, being stripped of all honor, glory, privileges, and power that they were vested in initially, finding themselves naked and defenseless, unable to screen themselves from the cold or the curse of a righteous law and the fury of Yahweh's justice. And in their minds, sin continues to come into the world. The covenant relationship that Yahweh made with them, first humans, to live in harmony and peace with him in the garden, was broken. Man, by his choice, had brought down upon himself and his descendants, even to us, all the consequences of his own rebellion. Guilt, shame, misery, and ultimately death. And with each ensuing generation, the sin got worse and worse and worse. The first child of Adam and Eve murdered the second in jealousy. Genesis, the 4th chapter, the 1st verse. Now Adam knew his Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain. Note this: I have gotten a man with the help of Yahweh. We get snippets here and there, and how much he talked to them in the garden. He talked to them a lot about many things. Many believe that Eve was thinking of Cain as the promised one. That's how much they talked. How much they talked. Many believe that Eve, thinking of Cain, somehow felt that Cain was the promised seed and that therefore she thus triumphed over him. As her words may be read, I have gotten a man, the Lord. Thinking this was the child Yahweh spoke of in Genesis, the 3rd chapter, the 15th verse. When Yahweh said, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise his head, and you shall bruise his heel. Somehow, here, Yahweh spoke of Yeshua, but it's possible that Eve might have been mistaken, assuming Cain to be the Messiah. As Samuel, when he said, surely the Lord's anointed is before me, speaking of Eliab. 1 Samuel, 16th chapter, 6th verse. When they came before, he looked Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed is before him. But Yahweh said to him, do not look on his appearance or his height or his stature, because I have rejected him. For Yahweh sees not as a man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but Yahweh looks on the heart. It is possible that the difference that Eve made between her first 2 children set Cain's anger in motion. About Abel over Yahweh's attitude toward their offerings to him. Certainly no excuse, but a possible focus of Cain's sin against his brother. Genesis 4, the 2nd chapter. Genesis 4, the 2nd chapter. 4th chapter, 2nd verse. And again, she bore his brother Abel. Now, Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain, a worker of the ground, a farmer. In the course of time, Cain brought to Yahweh an offering of the fruit of the ground. Nothing spectacular about that. He brought some stuff that was laying around. He didn't even go through it and pick the best of it. He just picked some stuff. And Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. And Yahweh had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering, he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. At some set time, Cain and Abel brought to Adam as the head of the family, each one an offering to Yahweh. This action of offerings of their increase, which we have reason to think was a divine appointment of some kind. some kind of appointed and continual y'all say it, offering of some sort, tithe of some sort, even back then. These offerings may have been given as part of an early Sabbath ritual of some sort. But little reliable information is available about this. And by now, it was buried anyway. You couldn't find it because they are actively eradicating any information about this time period to bolster that idea that these things just happened. But the offerings plainly were an obligation of some sort and certainly had preordained parameters which both brothers and family were fully aware. Yet Cain rebelled humanly according to family character, instilled by Satan. Verse 6. Yahweh said to Cain, "Why are you angry? And why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it." An option was given. He didn't take it, however. He rose up. What we do whenever we're wrong. Cain spoke to Abel, his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Genesis 4th chapter, 9th verse. Then Yahweh said to Cain, "Where is Abel, your brother?" He said, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And Yahweh said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground." He knew what happened. "And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand." Cain's plea, he pleads not guilty and adds rebellion to his sin. Note why. He endeavors to cover up a murder, deliberate murder, with a deliberate lie. "I do not know." He knew perfectly well what he did to Abel, and yet had the impudence to deny it. Thus, in Cain, the devil had both a murderer and a liar from the beginning. Note how sinners' minds are blinded and their hearts darkened by the deceitfulness of their sin. Sin strangely blinds us, thinking it possible to conceal our sins from a Yahweh that sees all from above. And we are strangely aloof, thinking it desirable somehow to conceal sins from Yahweh, who pardons only those who openly confess their sins to him. He impudently charges his judge, the Yahweh of this universe, with folly and injustice in putting the question to him, am I my brother's keeper? He should have humbled himself and have admitted, I am my brother's keeper. And in this case, my brother's murderer. But he flies in the face of Yahweh himself, daring to ask, am I my brother's keeper? Surely he is old enough to take care of himself. Nor did I ever take any charge of him. You did. Held the rock in one hand and held his life in the other. Somehow, this reflects on Yahweh and his providence, as if he had said, aren't you his keeper? If he is missing, blame yourself, who never undertook to keep him. Please note how far man has fallen in sin in one generation. How many generations has this been? They are falling on the streets of Chicago every day. Worse every day. This was the first couple and their progeny. If it weren't for the flood, it would be far worse by now. Note how far sin fell in one generation. A charitable concern for our brethren is a duty which is strictly required of us as believers, but is generally neglected by us. Cain not only abrogated this duty, but rebelled against it, putting aside in favor of his direct disobedience and its consequences those who are unconcerned in the affairs of the brethren. The example of the farm animals I brought forth last week. Those who are unconcerned in the affairs of their brethren take no care for their hurt, loss, or diminished good name when they have opportunity to prevent those. In their spirit, do in effect mimic Cain and do the work of Satan. Yet notice what Yahweh respects. Hebrews, the 11th chapter, the 4th verse. By faith, Abel offered to Yahweh a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous. Right? Yeah? Righteous. Yahweh commending him by accepting his gifts. And through his faith, though he died, he still speaks to us to this day. Yet profound answers to our question are found here in the Bible. Within a few generations, Yahweh finally had seen enough and was ready to destroy mankind and abandon his plan for humanity. Had become under the influence of Satan more than even Yahweh could deal with. Genesis, the 6th chapter, the 5th verse. Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every intention of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. And Yahweh regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So Yahweh said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the land, from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things. And even by now, the animals had begun to use themselves in other ways, unintended. So Yahweh said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things of the birds in the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. And I don't even put anything to that. I don't know what they were doing. Even the animals were destroyed. Yet he saw hope in Noah. Yahweh chose Noah and his family to continue in righteousness after sending a flood to destroy all life from the earth, including the animals, who were just as vicious and violent as the humans were. And I will say no more about that. Their nature having been changed by Satan when animal skins were used to make the clothing for Adam and Eve. The nature of all life descended into baseness, competitiveness, and murder for sport, scheme, or gain. Yahweh told Noah of his plans and why in Genesis, the 6th chapter, the 13th verse. Yahweh said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside with pitch, like a tar. Make the ark like this: 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, 45 feet high. And if you want to see one, Ken Ham has made one. I forget where it is. But it's one there. It's made to these measurements exactly. There may be more than one by now. It made money, so there might be more than one by now. I'll check into that before next week. 16. Make a roof for the ark. Finish it to a cubit above and set the door of the ark in its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark. You, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep alive with you. There shall be male and female, nothing else.
That's right.
All the rest of it is fake anyway. I said it, and I'll say it again. Of the birds according to their kinds, and of the animals according to their kinds, and every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind. 2 of every sort will come with you to keep them alive. Also take with you every sort of food that is eaten up and stored up, and it shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that Yahweh commanded him. The construction of the ark took Noah 100 years. How many of us would commit our lives or 100 years to anything solely on the word of Yahweh? Not many. Not many. The construction of the ark took 100 years. According to the description, the ark was not a ship, but an immense house in form and structure, like the houses of the East, designed not to sail, but only to float. The large cubit, being the one that built by, is 21.8 inches. Thus, the ark was 557 feet long, 91 feet wide, 2 inches wide, and 47 feet high. The building of the ark and the time consumed in it did 2 things for Yahweh. It proved the faithfulness of Noah to Yahweh to build a boat for nearly a century in a world that had yet to see a drop of rain. While also raising families according to the plan of Yahweh. It also, in the same stroke, proved the faithlessness of the rest of humanity in watching this thing built and not being the least bit curious about why. Not one person Even Bill Cosby, in his days of popularity, had a great skit about this. It ended in rain. What's rain? It's what's coming. What is it? He ain't nothing. He ain't nobody. We have been told in the past that Noah was laughed at, scorned, and tormented. There are no instances of scorn or laughing, but Noah did warn these people. The proof is here. 2 Peter, the 2nd verse. 2nd verse in the 5th verse. 2nd chapter in the 5th verse. If he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly. The word here is herald, G 2718, K-Ruix, to preach, herald, crier, proclaimer, preacher, a public servant of one who summoned the ecclesia. The word ecclesia later was formed for the church. Noah, being a herald, warned the people, but he fell on deaf ears. Yet there is this profound warning for us all in the red letters of Yeshua in Matthew, the 24th chapter, the 35th verse. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Something to look forward to for all of us. He said, tongue firmly in cheek. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark. And they were unaware until the flood. What? Unaware? He was preaching among them for 100 years. That awareness must be something else. They were warned. And the warning was directional, was coming from one place. We are going to have an advantage, however. The rest of the world doesn't. We have, in its the new startup, we will have CNN. Well, that's not much. Might be better off with TMZ, but well, as far as content anyway. But we will have media broadcasting these things. don't believe everything you see, but see something and recognize among yourselves that it's coming from that morning. And we won't have 100 years. And they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. This is the Bible's best warning of the end time. Don't miss it. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. In this day and age, note how few people are coming to church and worshiping in spirit and truth. Also, note how few people believe that the Bible is true in this age. Same as in the days of Noah. Most modern believers either believe that there will be no return of Yeshua, or they believe the Bible is simply literature like any other fiction book. Even degreed clergy are taught this in seminary. As a consequence, when the end times come and we see the abomination of desolation come into the holy place, half of the world will not know what the holy place is. And we'll be so glad to see abominations done there in Jerusalem that they won't see them as any kind of warning about the things about to happen. It'll be just as the people of Noah's time, seeing a 4-story boat the size of a soccer field built in a field where nothing around it was. Everybody saw it. And the only question we asked of him was for rain. It won't make sense to them either in the end time. All of the problems we are running into in this age, weather, storms, hurricanes, drought, cancer, all of it came because of the sins of Adam and Eve and the pulling down of the canopy above the earth. Now that these waters have been here all these years, water doesn't scare anybody anymore. But that was a black man said that. James Meredith. Not right. Got the name wrong, but he is right. Fire next time. Note what happened when the flood came upon the earth. Genesis, the 7th chapter, the 1st verse. Almost done. Then Yahweh said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of clean animals. What is a clean animal? Even this far back, there was a distinction. And we have never properly copped to that one. I ain't going to call nobody out. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, the male and his mate, and the pair of animals that are not clean, the male and his pair of animals. The birds of the air also, male and female, to keep their offspring alive on their earth. For in the 7 days I will send rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights. And every living thing that I have made, I will blot out from the ground, from the face of the ground. And Noah did all that Yahweh had commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters came upon the earth. And Noah and his sons and his wives and his sons' wives with him went into the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Of clean animals and of animals that are not clean, and of birds and of everything that creeps on the ground. 2 and 2, male and female. And now that things are as backwards as they are, now we know why he specified what genders there were. A couple of years ago, why did he do that? Now nobody asks the question. Now you say the wrong pronoun, you might not have your freedom long. And that's enough about that. 10. And after 7 days, the waters on the earth, flood came upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month. We can track this if we have the time. Not today. This kind of detail is what's needed. And it's here. We haven't used it. We have here the information that will tell us exactly when the flood started. The springs of the deep sent water up. The canopy above the earth was released, and all of the water surrounding the earth as a greenhouse came down onto the earth. Torrents of water came from the sky and from the fountains of the deep. This continued for 40 days and 40 nights. The earth's land began to break away into pieces. Initially, all land was one triangular landmass. Now it began to break apart, and the separate land masses were divided by what now became seas and oceans. The springs of the deep brought up superheated water And one might think that fish would have no problems surviving in water. Some water is fresh and some salty. No water is 300 degrees. In some spots, the water was very hot for a while until those fish were killed off. A lot of this stuff we, for a long time, didn't think about much because we didn't believe this. Start believing it, people. Exploring it, people. But also, the water is not livable when the water is superheated by geysers and lava from beneath the earth's surface. If Yahweh intended all fish to survive, they would have. But it is obvious that some of them, for various reasons, did not. The violence of the waters and possibly the breaking and release of the canopy of water above the earth created a tilt of 33.5 degrees tilt toward the sun. This tilt caused a little cataclysm called 4 seasons. Now we have 4: spring, summer, and fall, and winter. Before the flood, we didn't have these 4 seasons. We had one. Warm all the time. And most of the death and things of that nature, every time a season of tornadoes comes around, everybody comes on TV. God did that. No. Your sin did that. He can't do nothing about it. What? He will. In his time. In his time. Man first I will get to that. Although most scientists deny and continually debunk the flood and create excuses for all the environmental changes that we have seen over the years, no one denies the fact that the increasingly violent changes in the weather and instability of the course, no one dares say that sin was the genesis of these changes. But it is obvious to any thinking believer that these facts are true. It would take hours to detail all of the effects of sin since the flood. Honestly, man's first concerted effort after the flood was determined to not sin anymore. No. All of them gathered in earnest to build something that would protect them from the flood next time. Genesis, the 11th chapter, the first verse. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain to the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had bricks for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build a city, a tower with its top in the heavens." The first thing they did after the flood was build something to next flood make of no effect on them. That's man. Forever making the wrong decision. The people of earth have been in constant rebellion against Yahweh and his intervention in their lives ever since. They claim his leadership, but a glance at the real leadership, it's obvious that man has no interest in the leadership of Almighty God. None. All of what we have seen around us since the beginnings of the Garden of Eden has been only rebellion and sin against Yahweh. There is no need to speak of Nimrod. And even after this, the first thing they did after he brought them back together was this little nugget from 1 Samuel 8. Almost done. When Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second, Abijah. Both were judges in Beersheba. Yet his sons did not walk in his ways, but he turned aside again for gain, lucre. They took bribes and perverted justice. Recognizing the age and infirmity of Samuel and the corrupt nature of his sons, why did they not simply anoint another judge, removing his sons, and keep Yahweh as their leader? No. Then verse 4, then all the leaders of Israel gathered together and said to Samuel at Ramah, and said to him, "Behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in our ways. Now appoint for us a judge to judge you instead of Yahweh." And the thing displeased Samuel when they said, "Build a judge to us." Obey the voice of your people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being their king over them. There is one solution, and that one solution will be divulged in part 3. Next week.